Hey, how's it going, everybody? Today I'm going to be going over some of the different summon mechanics in the game to try to help out the newer players and the returning players. So hopefully this video does help you out a bit, and if it does, leave a like and a comment if you have any questions, and if you're new, consider subscribing. But we'll go and get into it and go with one of the easier mechanics in the game, which is ritual summoning. There's a few good ritual decks out right now, which is Megalith and Necros. But basically, all you need for a ritual summon is the ritual card, which you can tell by the little flame right there. That'll be a ritual card, and usually it will say like ritual in the name, and then the text will be like, this is used to ritual summon a certain monster. For this one, it's Blackluster Soldier, and even some of them allow you to send materials from your extra deck or banish them from the grave, just depending on what the ritual spell card allows you to do. But for some of the standard ritual spell cards, you'll need to send them from your hand or field. So yeah, you just activate the spell, and this one requires you to send monsters that you control or in your hand to the graveyard whose levels equal 8 or more. So for this example, these two are over 8. You would send it to the graveyard, and you'd be able to special summon your ritual monster. Pretty simple, pretty easy. If you are new and you're trying to figure out a deck to play, you can consider picking up a ritual deck. It's a pretty easy mechanic, and it's pretty fun as well. Next, we'll go into fusion summoning. There's two different types of fusion summoning. One where you need a polymerization card or a archetype specific fusion card. And then contact fusing, which I'll get to in a second. But of course, fusion monsters are going to be in the extra deck, so you do not need that in your hand. You just need it in your extra deck. And then you'll need some sort of fusion card, either a polymerization, or for this example, Shaddoll's have their own archetype fusion card. But basically, you would just activate it, and you can either send, if you had that on your field and this in your hand, since the fusion monster's material requirement is a Shadoll monster and a light monster, you can send this face-up card and this card in your hand to the graveyard to fusion summon it. Since this is the Shadoll and this is the light, send those to the graveyard, and you'll be able to special summon the construct. And with this specific fusion card, if your opponent controlled an extra deck monster, when you activated it, you'd be able to send cards from your deck to the graveyard to perform the fusion summon. But yeah, so basically all you need is the fusion card, and then you would need the materials required to special summon it from the extra deck. Another pretty easy mechanic in the game, another one I would suggest picking up if you are new to the game. But off to contact fusing. Contact fusing is pretty cool too. Of course, the fusion monster would be in the extra deck, but for contact fusing, you do not use polymerization. It'll even say it on the card text right here. You do not use polymerization. But basically, you have to control both of them. One can't be in your hand. But basically, for this specific deck, you would banish both of them to special summon the fusion monster from the extra deck. There are some contact fusing decks, such as Gladiator Beast, which instead of banishing the materials, you would shuffle them back into the deck and then fusion summon that monster. So contact fusing is pretty cool. It's really nice. You don't need a polymerization card. But yeah, pretty cool. And then off to synchro summoning. Synchro summoning is pretty cool as well. Of course, the synchro monsters being in the extra deck, all you need is a tuner monster and a non-tuner monster to perform the synchro summon. You would have to control both of them, and then you send the tuner and the non-tuner to the graveyard as materials for the synchro summon. And the synchro summon, the levels of the monsters have to equal the level of the Synchro monster. So since that's a 3 and a 4, would be 7, which you can Synchro summon this monster. And of course you have to fulfill the requirements for it as well, 1 tuner, 1 non-tuner. Some monsters require specific things, like some monsters you need a dark tuner and a non-dark tuner monster. But yeah, you just gotta pay attention to the material requirements and then the levels. Of course, this being a level 8, Unizombie has an effect, which Unizombie is the tuner, which you can send a zombie monster from your hand or deck to the graveyard to give it a level. So if you do use that effect, it'll become a level 4, and you can Synchro summon into an 8. Pretty cool. One of my favorite mechanics in the game. And it's pretty fun. Off to XC summoning. Now this is my favorite summoning mechanic. Just because this is what was the new thing when I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Again. But basically, of course, you need to control the monsters, and then you overlay them, and these become material for the X-Seed. Some monsters require specific monsters, like 2 level 4 Noble Knights, and then you X-Seed summon it. And then these are now materials, so for their effects you can detach one material to do something, a certain effect, and then you would detach and send it to the graveyard. And then of course, even though these are 2 Noble Knight monsters, some monsters, or Xyz monsters, just require 2 level 4 monsters. They're just generic, and you can special summon that as well. Pretty nice and pretty easy. Off to probably one of the most hated summoning mechanics for a while, and that is Pendulum summoning. This used to be a lot better before the Master Rule change, but basically there's Pendulum zones, which since this is a Pendulum monster, as you can tell from the monster border up here and then the spell border on the bottom, those are the Pendulum monsters. But basically there's Pendulum zones on the far left and far right. So basically you would need to set your skills, which is a 2 skill and an 8 skill. And then you can now Pendulum summon monsters whose levels are between 2 and 8. So any monsters 3 through 7 can be Pendulum summoned. So if these were all in your hand, you can Pendulum summon all 3. And then if you, for example, if you Xseed summon, or not Xseed, Link summon, sorry. These, instead of going to the graveyard, they go to the top of the extra deck, and then your Link monster would come out. Just go into generic Link. And then with the new revision, if these are in your extra deck, or on top of your extra deck, which, like I said, they go there after leaving the field, and you have your Link monster, you're able to, and if this is in your hand, you'd be able to Pendulum summon the 1 monster from your hand, and you'd only be able to Pendulum summon 1 monster from the top of the extra deck, since you only have 1 zone open, because Pendulum monsters and Link monsters have to be special summoned to a zone a Link monster points to. So you'd only be able to special summon the 1. But if, of course, if you had a monster with multiple zones, you'd be able to special summon 2, 1 to each zone. So yeah, before the Master Rule, you didn't need the Link monsters. So if this was on your, these 2 were on top of the extra deck, this one was on the hand, you'd be able to Pendulum summon all 3 again. So yeah, it used to be a really strong mechanic, but now with the small little nerf, it's not as crazy, but you still will see some Pendulum decks here and there at your locals or online. So yeah, and if you're trying to pick one up, they're still pretty fun, but they are a bit nerfed now, so to say. But now, finally, the last little summoning mechanic is Link monsters. Now Link monsters, they're kind of a pain to get a hang of, but basically you have to fulfill the Link rating and the material rating. or material requirement, sorry. So this one is a link 1, but you need to send a link 2 or higher monster to the graveyard to link summon it. So for example, if you had like Isolde on the field in the extra monster zone, you can send that to the graveyard to link summon for the link cross. And then for this one, the material requirement is 2 zombie monsters, and it's a link 2 rating, so you would just need the 2 materials, which would be your 2 zombie monsters being on the field, send them to the graveyard to link summon. And then for like link 3s and link 4s, of course you have to pay attention to the material requirements and the link rating. So this is 2 effect monsters, or 2 monsters with a different name, and it's a link rating 3. So if you had Solitaire and the Vampire Sucker, you'd be able to link summon it by sending the link 2 Vampire Sucker and the Solitaire being a link 3. And then for link 4, you would have to have, you could have Vampire Sucker and your 2 monsters, because this requires 3 effect monsters, and it's a link 4 rating. So yeah, it would be the link 2, 3, and 4. That'd be the 3 effect monsters, and they would come out to a link rating of 4, since the Vampire Sucker is a link 2, and you'd be able to summon the Boral Sword. And then really quickly for the Avermax, it requires, it's a link 4 rating, and it requires 2 monsters special summon from the extra deck. So if you had Vampire Sucker and you had Isolde, they're both link 2 rating, and they're both from the extra deck. So you can use these 2 materials, coming out to a 4 link rating, and then you will fulfill the requirements to summon it as well. So yeah, all you gotta do is pay attention to the materials needed for the link summon. But if you only had like the Vampire Sucker and say you had the Unizombie and you had Synchro summoned before, so these would be the 2 from the extra deck, that being a link 2, that'd be the 3rd material. And then the 4th material, you'd still be able to go into Avermax because you fulfilled all the requirements. But yeah, it's kind of something you got to play around with, kind of got to get used to. But yeah, hopefully this helped you out a bit. I know the link summoning can be a pain to get a hang of. But yeah, until next time, I'll see you guys later.